60th anniversary. Happy birthday MCN, and thanks very much for another great show. The story of the Norton rotary valve, it starts at the far right with Walsing Elsie, who apparently was extremely fast in a straight line but not so happy to go around corners, and it goes all the way around to winning defeating the Japanese manufacturers to win a British Championship with Steve Spray in 1989. Round to, that was with the John Player special backing, round to the Duckham's backed rotary valve Norton of Ian Simpson that won the British Superbike Championship in 1994. So for that particular period of time, from about 1988 through 1994, these bikes were major players on the British Superbike scene, and even scored a couple of World Championship points in 500cc Grand Prix in Phillip Island and Donington Park. 5.8cc engines, and as the inventor will proudly tell you, right away round from my right to my left is fundamentally the same engine. Nothing really changed with that engine once they got it beating at 170 miles an hour and 120 brake horsepower. At the end of our little discussion here on stage, this is going to get started up. This is the senior TT winning 1992 machine of Steve Hislop. Also very good apparently in a straight line. It took a very, very brave man to get it around the Isle of Man and to win a TT. But as John McGuinness said on stage earlier today, Hislop was something of a genius. A man who lapped at 124 miles per hour in the early 90s demands a lot of respect. The guy I want to introduce to you first, can I apologise by the way, because of the pre-race publicity so to speak, talked of the two riders, Trevor Nation and Steve Spray, being with us. They've both come up with pathetic excuses for not being here at the 11th hour. A leaking roof in Cornwall being Trevor Nation's version, and a romantic trip to Paris with his wife, organised by her, being Steve Spray's reason. And I can see a very tuned, look at those two looking at one another in the middle of it. Was that a look as if to say, you've never done that for me, love? Could have done it within happening another weekend, I've got to say. So the two gentlemen I'm going to introduce you to were the major players in the engine and chassis evolution of these motorcycles and bringing this amazing British success to British circuits against the might of the Japanese. The first man I'd like to introduce to you, he actually had a remarkable background really, because what I didn't know was that he was 3 times in the mid-70s the British 50cc road racing champion, and that was on a four-stroke Honda against the might of the then all-conquering 2-stroke. So he obviously knew something about tuning engines from way back then. He actually joined Norton in the service department in 1986, 87, and then was moved into the research and development department, but still had to do all his work on these bikes in the caretaker's shed, because the management weren't interested in going racing with a rotary valve bike, and they just poo-pooed the idea that the thing could ever perform any faster than the production bikes that they had at the time. So please will you welcome the man who started this whole mini revolution, ladies and gentlemen, Brian Crighton. Brian, I'll tell you what, while there's just 2 of us, we'll remain standing up here until we... now, so you got the... well, just tell us a little bit of your background. You had this 4-stroke Honda, I don't know what on earth it was, but you managed to win those 3 50cc British Championships. You had your Honda dealership at the time, but you obviously knew how to get the absolute best out of engines back then.
Yeah, I had... basically, I couldn't afford to buy a proper race bike, so I had to modify a road bike really, and obviously the thing was not powerful enough really, so I had to try and get a lot of extra power out of it. So I read every book I could on engine tuning, etc., and also I did a lot of experimentation myself, and I used to do silly things like getting absolutely soaked by having a hose connected to the water tap, connected up to the inlet port, with it flat out, spraying all water all over me with a pair of goggles on, trying to see what was happening with the water flow. Because I was working on trying to understand flow, and I thought, well, water's probably as good as anything to do it with. And I realised that if you could get the water clear when it was going through things, it was obviously no turbulence in it. there was turbulence, it made the water all bubbling. So I did a lot of work with that, and did a lot of work with pistons and camshafts, which I made myself without any machinery really, just using hand tools really. And I learnt a lot. I made my own dyno, which was basically a big fan. So I used to blow my hat off every time I was on there, and playing around trying to learn what everything did. And I had some good results on that, but I couldn't win on that one because obviously it was just a road bike really. So eventually I managed to buy a bike off Nigel Stone that he had, which was a Honda CR110, which was an 8-speed gearbox, single 4-stroke engine with 4 valve. It was like a very miniature, you know, it was like a version of their race bikes, but just a single cylinder version with 8-speed gearbox, as I say. And I worked on that, changed piston and worked on the cams, and I got it going really well. I had a lever on it so I could change the ignition time while I was going along the straight, you know, to pick the engine and everything. And that's what I won the championship on, beating the 2 strokes to the reluctance of them.
Fantastic. You had that Honda dealership up until 1986, in the Midlands of course, as you can tell from the accent I'm sure. And then how did the connection with the Norton factory come up? Because they were in Lichfield at the time, weren't they? So they were very local to you.
Yeah, actually it was a Shenston, which is by Lichfield, yeah. But I had a friend of mine that worked there, and he turned up at our house with a prototype rotary road bike. It was just a prototype. And he let me have a go on it, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic, you know. You've got to get me a job there, because I'd finished the shop then, and I was a bit in between jobs, and I said, you've got to try and get me a job there, this is fantastic. Anyway, he got me a job in the service department, and my job there really was to look after the police bikes, because Norton had been given some money to make bikes, but they couldn't sell them to the public, they could only sell them to the police forces and the Royal Air Force, etc. For patrol bikes and that sort of thing. So I had the job of looking after the police demonstrators, etc. And obviously and servicing the police bikes. So I used to have a lot of fun on that, running around on those, because there were police bikes with them just flat out everywhere, having quite a lot of fun with them. So anyway, and I thought, wow, what a fantastic thing, because I was a racer anyway. I thought, I'm sure I can make this into a race bike, but the management just weren't interested at the time. They just weren't interested, didn't think it'd be competitive. I kept saying to them, I'm sure I can get 120 horsepower out of this engine, because at the time 87 horsepower was the best they ever had. Anyway, they weren't really interested, but I talked him into letting me have it. There was a crashed police bike that had been lying in the corner for a long time, and I said, can I have this and do some work on this? I'll do it at my own expense, I'll do it at night, and this, that, and that's what I did. And I did an engine, put it on the dyno, and one night when everybody had gone, there's only a couple of people there, I run it up, and to my amazement it did 120 horsepower the first time I run it. So it didn't occur to me to ask you this morning, but what did you do to it? Or is that a long and complex thing to explain? It's basically the way the engine was cooling itself. They use what they call a charged cooled engine, the road bike. So all the intake air that goes into the rotor eventually comes through the middle of the engine to take the heat out. So it uses its intake air to cool the internals of the engine. The problem with that is it obviously heats up. I mean, it's going into the engine at 100 degrees C, which is not good for power. So my idea was to completely isolate the cooling of the engine from the carburetor, you know, from the intake side, and develop this exhaust ejector system, which is what these bikes have all more or less gone on. Actually, the idea was thought up from a steam engine. Actually, a steam engine uses basically a steam ejector to draw the fire up when it's puffing along. So I basically pinched that idea, worked on it, and made it work on this bike engine. And so all the exhaust energy going out, it causes a vacuum effect, and that was drawing the air out of the engine to cool it. And that's how I got immediate power straight away.
Do you know what Whittam says? He always says there's nothing new on this earth. There's always something that's gone before that can lead you in the right direction. Amazing. So you got the chance to go and demonstrate the speed of this motorcycle, didn't you, at some point, actually out on track? Well, to try and convince the management that this was worth pursuing. Yeah, what happened is I adopted on the engine and said that, look, you know, I've got this performance out of it, can I do it, can I make a bike? And they weren't really that interested. I said, well look, this police bike that I've got the engine out of, can I just have that?
because they weren't doing anything with it. So they basically agreed to let me have it. And I cut the back end off and just tubed it up so I could put some different shocks on the back, yeah. And it's that one right on the end there. I mean, I feel it's a bit of an abortion really, but it was done really just at my own cost, just to prove to them that the bike would be pretty quick. And we took it to Myra testing ground, and we run it around there. But the funny thing was that Myra don't really like any race bikes there at all anyway, but we talked him into letting us run it. But the guy that was in charge of it said, well look, there's some very fast Jaguars going around at the moment doing some speed runs. Says just tell your rider just to keep looking behind every time he comes to a corner, because there's a very fast Jag coming up, going to come up behind him. Anyway, he went off, and he just went whoosh straight past all these Jaguars, and there was no comparison in speed. We got a policeman with his radar gun that just happened to be there, and I said, can you just look at what speed it's doing? And he couldn't believe it, 170 mile an hour, you know, never seen that fast on his speed gun. And I got the manager of Myra that was by us, and when he saw this speed gun thing, I can always make, he says, blood and sands. And he got on his radio and he was saying, can you get these Jaguars off, these slow Jaguars off? There's a very fast motorcycle going around here. And he cleared them off, so that was quite funny really.
And did anything change back at HQ then after that, or you were still bashing your head against the brick wall a bit?
Well, I was still bashing my head against the brick wall really. They still didn't want to know, so I spat my dummy out really, and I resigned and left. So to do something else. But I was one of the experts on the electronics and some of the things I was doing. That I suddenly realised that somebody had gone that was doing some of the essential electrics. So they basically got in touch with me again and asked me would I go back. And I said, well, I'll go back on one proviso, that I can make a proper racing bike, that you let me make a proper racing bike. So, which is what they did, and they basically kicked the caretaker out of the house that was at the end of the drive. And they gave me the house, the caretaker's house, as a race shop to build the bikes in. So. And that was what the red, silver, blue one was, one of the first proper race bikes we did really.
And at that point, of course, a previous nuisance who'd been in your life in past years, racing your bikes, re-entered your life to try and sort out the handling and the kind of other aspects of this projectile that you'd produced. So I think we ought to get him up on stage, don't you? Ladies and gentlemen, the man who then got involved in this project, the father of a current British superbike rider who himself had been a former British champion in the 1970s. Please will you welcome Dave Hickman. Oh, Dave means business. He's taking his jacket off for this visit. Sit yourself down, young man. Right. So listen, you were introduced to one. Who gave this the name of?
You're going to say Walton Elsie, aren't you?
Yes.
These Northerners, they get it wrong. That's Walton Walter. Welcome to Walton Walter.
I didn't realise the man from Burton-on-Trent obviously isn't a Northerner.
No.
So was that the machine at the far end, the one that you were first introduced to?
I did see that, but the first one I was introduced to was the red, silver, blue one, which Brian performed with Malcolm Heath at Brands Hatchwood at the end of 1987. I finished in the Grand Prix because I needed to stay at home. I've been away for years and years doing Grand Prix, so I decided to stay home. And Brian said, oh, come along and have a look at this rotary thing that we've got. So I went along to Brands Hatch and watched it. It broke the gearbox and did a few other things, which it was quite common at that moment. Bear in mind, it's a standard road gearbox, and this lunatic had put from 87 horsepower to 120 into it straight away. So that creamed the gearboxes every time we took them out. But during the winter of '87, I went over to the factory, spoke to Brian about it, and he said, well, you know, have a feel at it, have a little ride on it up and down the factory yard. So I said, is that okay? He says, yeah, nobody will take any notice. So I stand by the side of the thing, warming it up, and I'm flicking the throttle, and the thing is going bang, 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 bang. I'm thinking, Christ, what is this? Anyway, I warmed it up, and that was literally 0 revs to maximum in a flick of literally that fast, bang, instant. And I'm looking at him thinking, nobody can ride this bloody thing, that's ridiculous. So I sat on it, and I rode it down the yard at the factory, and I hit the throttle 3 times. 3 times it put a 10-foot black line down the yard. I went bang, bang, bang. and 3 bloody great big black lines, and I stopped it and I thought, Christ almighty. I turned it around and came back up the yard, and by that time everybody that was in the factory was now out the factory watching this lunatic on this motorbike. And I again had the same thing. I went 1, 2, 3, and it was 3 black lines down the yard. And I said to Brian, this is the fastest bag of shit I've ever sat on. What is this? I mean, I said, you can't race it like this. No rider can ride a bike that hits maximum as soon as you touch it. Anyway, the inspiration was there. The obvious potential was there. So I decided to join Brian and the small crew in the caretaker's house, which we kicked him out and converted the front room, put double doors on the bloody thing. The kitchen was the engine build area, upstairs was the coffee lounge. But we spent a lot of time in that place actually developing this red, silver, blue one. That one actually has the RG 500 Suzuki chassis on, and because of my background in GP and British Championships and things, I learned a lot about how to set up motorbikes, how to design chassis, how to develop suspension systems, and by the end of '88, that particular motorcycle was into about a 2nd or 3rd generation chassis, but also different suspension as well. I've got used to seeing upside down forks at the GPs, and we were the first to run upside down forks in this big piston forks in this country because of what I'd seen White Power do with Stefan Mertens developing on 250 Grand Prix machines. So that's sort of where I came in, was the beginning of '88, where Brian had gone on to the Mark II, if you like, which was the RG chassis. But the engine was so powerful by the time this man had done with it in 90, it went from 120 to 137 horsepower, and this was all done within months. But of course the gearbox was suffering, so we had quite a few issues, which we developed in front of the public. Obviously everybody was watching and seeing us break the things and overheat them and all sorts. There's a few issues with the rotary that we had to deal with, which Brian, with some assistance from old guys like me and a few others, he cured the major job. It's actually internally air cooled and externally water cooled, so it combines the two.